Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's the last broadcast before Santa comes sliding down your chimney, getting it on fire, causing a liability issue, getting stuck. You'll have to call public services. They'll bill you for that. And in the meantime, he'll be muttering, ho, ho, ho. And out of the wings will come Kamala Harris saying he's soliciting prostitution. And the Department of Justice will open an investigation. And before you know it, Christmas old. And nobody will want to gift into your children. He's saying,
we are starting off hot, boy. You are having internet issues. Rumble's not working with its new static stream key. These guys. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're still. Do what?
We were doing fine this morning before we got on the air.
Yeah, but
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just your internet connection is kind of wild, you know.
Well, it is what it is. I'm up in Vermont, and
buy us some time here, Norm. I need to set up a second Rumble stream key again.
So, I was saying, in this catastrophic Christmas of yours, what will happen in the end is the kids will get so fed up with the unfulfilled promise of the Christmas season that one of them will come out of the wings with a Quran and say, Allahu Akbar, and they'll convert to Islam. And the next thing you know, your neighbors will start turning up beheaded. Children will be missing. There'll be a Hamas chapter in your neighborhood, and college students will be flocking, saying, from the river to the sea, Israel must be free. I'm thinking this has the potential to be a bad Christmas season, but not at my house. We're ready. I think Mike is ready. I hope you're ready. We want to thank you for tuning in during the course of the year. We took yesterday off. I won't say why. Well, yes, I will. Mike forgot his youngest son had to go to a holiday party, and I wasn't sure that I could turn the machines on by myself. And so here we are, the last of the year. Are we yet?
Almost. I'm just now getting the stuff together here, and good thing we
apologize to you, everyone. We actually do work.
I make no apologies. You know why?
I make apologies for Mike. So let me tell you, I was in North Carolina one day. I was trying to find James Dickey, the author of Deliverance, and I was singing I was playing dueling banjo from loudspeakers in a rented convertible, driving through a swamp. Any hillbillies out there? I said, hello, any hillbillies out there? And out of the bushes crawled this guy. He looked to be in his 30s. He was still wearing diapers, and he had his mother's milk dripping down one chin and spittoon the tobacco dripping down the other. And he said, hi, my name's Mike Boyer. How are you? And the next thing you know, we were a thing. And we decided we'd create a podcast because
Hey, I read something you wrote on the LinkedIn den, and it sounded nice, except it stuck. Can I help?
Well, I need all the help I can get. So we had to learn how to talk right. And, I taught Mike a few New Englandisms, and he taught me how to draw. And he's even introduced me to his family, Angry Dog, Uncle Pat, and others who grace the comments section of this page. Kind of like there's Angry Dog right now. Good morning, Angry Dog. Are you ready for Christmas? Have you been naughty or nice? I was trying to really misbehave this year. You might have noticed I got suspended. I went down to win my law license. That's on appeal. Will be decided early next year whether I actually have to take 6 months off of the law. I'm kind of hoping I do. There's so many other things I enjoy, although my clients would miss me for 6 months. And I was trying to misbehave because I wanted coal this year. And then Kamala Harris sent me a note and said, you can't burn it. It's bad for the environment. So now when people are bad, you get a solar panel. And I'm just thinking, God, how does that work? Anyhow, we're back. I see Jackson Barrett's here this morning. Yes, Jackson, I know we need to discuss the critical issue of our time, the thing on which everything turns, and that is whether natural-born citizenship is in the Constitution and whether Kamala Harris can legitimately occupy the office. And we need to eradicate the 8 years that Barack Obama unlawfully sat in office. And unless and until we decide that issue, we're not discussing anything that matters. We heard you, Jackson. We'll get to it in due course.
But I love Jackson joins us courtesy of X.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, I didn't know that was even possible.
Well, look, Junior Coltrane is back. What's up, Junior? I'm a dirty dog. That's what she said.
No. Junior Coltrane.
From a cat abbey, though. Look at
Junior. You reminded me of why they had to remake the movie The Exorcist. You're not a regular listener. I think some have already heard this. The old classic 50 years ago, little girl possessed by the devil. She looks at Father Karras, who's trying to exorcise her, and says, Father, your mother sucks cocks in hell. Well, Junior, they decided that that was offensive because it's okay to suck cock and it's okay to do so in hell. But the devil needs to offend. So they redid the movie so that the devil can now give a new offense to Father Karras. Father, your daddy's a white male who had sex in position. And oh my God, the crowd gasped. It was a cis terror moment, and the movie has been released to critical acclaim. Anyhow, I am Jackson.
For those of you streaming, streaming in, trickling in, I should say, over on Rumble. Quick explanation of the breakdown there. Rumble avowed itself, to be static stream key friendly and rolled out a beta version. And this morning we have a crisis of my own competence or of their inability to just follow through on the promise. There's a beta version of a static stream key they rolled out, and I attempted in good faith with diligent research to deploy it to an absolute Hindenburg of a flaming disaster. We went live on X and YouTube, and Rumble just said, I don't work. So we're now live on Rumble. No description, nothing crazy on the video, but we are there. So apologies for the weird timing.
Well, let's get to it, folks. I mean, take a look at what's going on in Maine today and ask yourself whether you recognize the republic you live in. Secretary of State Sheena, or I don't know how you pronounce it, Bellows, is obviously the top electoral official in Maine. In other words, she is the person who has to administer the state's laws with respect to eligibility for who gets on the ballot, how the ballots are printed and distributed, and she is Miss Election Integrity in Maine. So she was petitioned to keep Donald Trump off the ballot under the third section of the 14th Amendment. And you'll recall earlier in the week, we discussed the Colorado Supreme Court's decision to uphold striking Trump from the ballot after an evidentiary hearing before a district judge in Colorado. Plenty to say about the procedure there, plenty to say about the substantive law. The case will be rocketed right to the Supreme Court. And sometime early next year, the Supreme Court will effectively decide who can run for president in 2024. I'm not sure that's what the Constitution had in mind, but it's what we've got. Shayna is doing something different. Who needs a hearing? Who needs a court? Due process, schmoo process. Give it to the Shayna woman. And so she was going to decide just all on her lonesome today, in or out. Did he engage in insurrection or not? Now, this is no ministerial decision. This isn't looking at somebody's birth certificate and saying, I see you're over the age of 35. This isn't calling Jackson Barrett and saying, Jackson, give us the definitive interpretation of what a natural-born citizen is so that I can determine whether this guy gets on the ballot. No, Shayna didn't do. It's not this kind of decision. Whether Trump engaged in insurrection is a complicated question. You have to make factual findings. There are no public records that conclusively resolve this. And you may be tempted to say the House January 6th committee report does. But I'd like to remind you all of how the prosecutions with respect to January 6th have unfolded and what has been proven and what hasn't. The House January 6th committee and Liz Cheney, the rhino-in-chief who was pushing it on behalf of the Republicans and whose book, Oath and Honor, explains her dedication to one principle and one principle only: Donald Trump shall never be president. That committee leaped to the conclusion that Donald Trump organized and orchestrated the events on the ground on January 6th. But that case has never been brought to a legal courtroom and tested by realistic evidentiary standards. The Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, they were convicted of seditious conspiracy, that is, of agreeing to use force to oppose the authority of the United States government. But prosecutors in that case never attempted to prove that.
They were convicted of it.
But they were convicted of it. Yeah, I'm going to give the government that for purposes of this discussion. No prosecutor in either case ever argued that they were doing so at the direction of the president. No prosecutor in any of the hundreds of January 6 cases that have been resolved has ever given the missing link, that is, the connection between the Trump White House and those people on the ground. Indeed, Donald Trump himself has not been charged with seditious conspiracy. And that's the tell that tells me that the government knows that there's no there there, that the emperor is naked. And there was an interesting story. I don't recall where I saw it last night online. Why is Jack Smith not telling everybody why it's so urgent to try the case in March of next year? Because he can't. The reason, because he would lose credibility. There is no urgency to try the case against Donald Trump in March unless you want to get a verdict that says he engaged in obstruction of an official proceeding, so that you could dress that up in the form of a judgment to be the functional equivalent of a birth certificate to pass to secretaries of state around the country to say that it's been proven by competent evidentiary standards. It hasn't. So with respect to Shayna Bellows, she was going to make a decision today, but now she's soliciting opinions from others. I don't even know what that means. I'd like all of you to drop Shayna a note. I don't know if we have contact information today. Give her a call, shoot her an email. Just say, Shayna, and you know, I'd like to make a request of you. Give Mike and I a gift for Christmas. Write Shayna Bellows a note and say, what in the hell are you doing? ? Love, Law and Legitimacy. So, and again, those of you looking for something to do today, here you go. You can send an email to Shayna Bellows, sos.office@maine.gov. You can mail it. It might be too late. 148 State House Station, Augusta, Maine, 04333. And you -0148. It'll get it there in a nanosecond quicker, maybe. The note, Dear Shayna, quote, what in the hell are you doing? ? Close quote. For love, law, and legitimacy. Because what she's doing is unprecedented in the law. There's no evidentiary standard. There's no notice. There's no hearing. I guess there is an opportunity to be heard. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry can send in, their opinion to her, like Mr. Castro, who is a long shot candidate as Republican nominee for president. He's filed suits all over the country. There are 17, I think, states that actually have or had pending litigation challenging Trump's eligibility on a 14-3 theory. Most of these have been thrown out or withdrawn with prejudice on standing grounds. So the United States Supreme Court needs to step in. Shane is proving that this is sheer and utter chaos. We expect a decision early in the year.
Here's the silver lining here, Norm. What I take from all this is that anything is possible when you are stupid.
Well, and
hence think about the incompetence it requires of the Secretary of State to make this move in light of another state's federal court rendering a ruling, as controversial as this is, to back up and mind you, the procedural posture of that case. Everyone remember, Donald Trump was not a named party. The Colorado GOP was not a named party in that case. That case was filed against the Colorado Secretary of State.
Well, look, whatever's happened.
There's no irony in the fact that she is just deciding to delay adding his name to the ballot. That is her duty to discharge, as you already said, in a ministerial capacity. There is no explicit protocol or discretion that she wields over that part of the process. She's supposed to discharge that duty affirmatively. If somebody has a problem with her doing that, they do what they did in Colorado. That's the way it works.
Well, that's the way it's supposed to work. So the Supreme Court, you expect petitions before the Supreme Court, maybe before the first of the year, certainly on the second, when courts reopen after the holidays. This is going to be more significant than Bush v. Gore. And, it's going to be fun to watch because, I've mentioned a few times this week that I'm listening to Cass Sunstein's new book on constitutional interpretation. I cannot say enough good about that book. I may not agree with everything that Sunstein asserts, but in terms of a thoughtful analysis of the following proposition, here is this thing called the United States Constitution. What shall we make of it? It doesn't come with instruction manuals on how to read it. It doesn't interpret itself. It has to be interpreted. And there are all sorts of theories about how to do so. Textualism, originalism, Thayerism. We'll talk more about that perhaps on another episode. The notion that judicial review should be supported, democracy-enhancing norms. All of these are interpretive candidates that we bring to the Constitution to bring it to life. Here's what's going to happen with respect to, and here's what's happening and what I find so humorous about the litigation involving Section 14.3. 1 year ago, people's heads were exploding over Dobbs versus Women's Health Center, I think the Mississippi decision, in case rather, where the United States Supreme Court held that there was no federal right to privacy in the Constitution. And people were saying, oh, it's a living Constitution. There are rights outside the Constitution that have to be honored, yada, 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 yada. Those same people are now going to be interpreting Section 14.3, saying that was the second founding of the Republic, and this enshrines something which read in a textual basis, and with respect to the intentions, the original intentions of the directors and the public meaning of the words as they were used is binding in our time. And it's going to prove a point that I think needs to be proven, and that is how you decide to read the Constitution is driven by your interests. And there is no such thing as a disinterested reading of the Constitution. There can't be. I had trouble sleeping last night because, you get out of court and your mind starts racing. And I thought, maybe it's time to write a book on the criminal defense lawyer's Constitution, because that Constitution begins in a place of darkness. A criminal defense lawyer does not walk into a courtroom saying, I'm a strict constructionist, I'm a textualist, I'm this. Not if they're doing their job. A law professor might do that. A public interest lawyer might do that. Somebody who's going to court to prove through their client the evils of the incarceral state. These people, as we mentioned earlier, are unfit to practice law, which is why we favor disbanding the Bronx Defender's Office. The fact of the matter is, a lawyer should be governed by one thing and one thing only. The lodestar of an advocate is his client's interest, and a counselor sits with an office to determine how that interest can best be served within the shadow of the law as it exists in the context of that dispute. And the outer limits of that dispute and how that conflict will be managed comes through the United States Constitution. And candidly, no lawyer should put his interpretive commitments to the United States Constitution ahead of his lawyer's interest. Every good lawyer should be a pragmatist, and you should push the metes and bounds of constitutional interpretation as far as you can on your client's interest. The minute you find a lawyer who says, I don't read the Constitution this way or that way to the detriment of their client, it's that moment that the lawyer becomes half a lawyer and a complete idiot and a complete ass. And we've got a lot of complete asses in courts these days. Anyhow, let's keep an eye.
I want to recognize a couple of things over here on Rumble. First and foremost, thank you in the cloud for the $20 tip. Merry Christmas. Yeah. Cloud says,
she sent me a tip. She said, "Don't lose your day job." How come Mike gets money? I get snarky comments. Thank you in the cloud.
Come on. Also some, but seriously, thank you. Merry Christmas to you. Then we've got some other good comments here. Hans asks, why are both Portlands liberal hellholes?
I think it's got something to do with the coast, and I really mean that. I don't know if you've ever read John Krakauer's book, Into the Wild. It's a story of a man who moved up to Alaska because he wanted to get away from it all, and he found a remote piece of land in an abandoned bus, and he was going to establish his own Republic of One, and he froze to death and died. And in the course of this, you realize that the coasts attract people who just can't get along. If you look at the United States of America, this giant continent, the continental United States of America, and, attach Alaska to it through the trip through Canada, and you imagine all of us as pinned to the board with commitments in our communities. Most of us are too busy to go to extremes. I might get a wild hair up my hiney about X, Y, or Z, but I got a wife who loves me and needs me. 3 kids, 6 grandkids, scores of clients, and a lot of employees. So reality keeps me pinned to the board and keeps me busy 99% of the time. If you don't have a commitment to me, what are you going to do? The board gets shaken and you run, and where are you going? You end up on the coast. I'm a believer in the heartland. I like rural life away, which is why I spend as much of my time as I possibly can in Vermont.
Well, yeah, and your affinity for the rural area is none more evident than when your internet goes in and out like it was, making you sound like a robot. But
I am a member of the deep state. I had been programmed to say, "Merry Christmas, everyone. Be sure to register for your new vaccination and send your non-tax deductible contribution to the World Economic Forum so that we can open borders for every person to come to the United States until such time as the quality of life in the United States has deteriorated such that we are indistinguishable from a third world country."
Well,
remember,
please clip that. That was excellent, because it really was going in and out while you did that. That was perfect. You have no idea.
I don't.
Look, when we lean into the tech issues, we actually reach, like, we ascend to a higher level of content. It's amazing. It's amazing. Anyway, here we go. Let's move on to the high tech lynching making news. How about that one?
Okay, go for it.
All right, moving on. Giuliani, you specifically brought this one up, and of course, we'll spotlight my boy A.R. Hoffman, who comes through with the incredible articles. I'm such a fan of A.R. Hoffman. If anybody has, just let him know. Law Pod Daily, huge respect for the articles.
We should get him on as a guest. Of course, he's probably too smart to talk. I mean, of Stanford JD and Harvard PhD. AB, we'll sharpen our pencils and try to be quiet. You know, it's good for us.
You know, if I were A.R. Hoffman, I would scoff at us. You know,
just a quick note. He's now on his way to bankruptcy, and expect this to happen over and over and over again. You know, it's a sad tale. He mouthed off and apparently defamed, or at least was defaulted for having defamed some poll workers in Atlanta, and now they've been awarded by an angry jury $148 million. I mean, there's just something offensive about the civil justice system being turned into a lottery system. These two individuals would never have earned or gathered assets of $148 million if they lived 70 lifetimes. But yet an angry jury has decided to punish Giuliani, and in fact, they've crushed him, driving him into bankruptcy court. Expect there to be a resolution of the case with those individuals receiving maybe 3, 4, 5, 600,000, maybe $1 million each, and the other creditors lined up and offered pennies on the dollar. This is eye candy for the dispossessed. It happened to Alex Jones. There'll be a settlement for pennies on the dollar in that case at some point. It's going to happen in Rudy Giuliani's case. What is stunning to me is the trial court's ability and willingness to enter defaults on liability and then permit these cases to just go to a hearing in damages. It's starting to get to the point where I'm beginning to wonder whether we need to raise serious litigation about a Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial. It's also the case that there are runaway juries giving verdicts that just make no sense. You know, in the Alex Jones case, an FBI agent who was said to look like one of the fathers, first responding FBI agent who looked like one of the fathers in Alex Jones's view, was outed online and referred to not by name, but by image as a potential crisis actor. This man got $90 million from a verdict in Connecticut. $90 million because his reputation was destroyed. If there's an FBI agent in the United States that's legitimately making $90 million a year off their reputation, they must be influence peddling in a third world country. I mean, these verdicts are simply ridiculous, and they don't promote respect for the law, and they have a way of chilling speech elsewhere. In any case, an idol has fallen. You know, America's mayor is now selling pencils in a bankruptcy court. He's another victim of lawfare.
Check this out. Within the article, this is why I love A.R. Hoffman in part. Quote, the filing also lists potential liabilities that have not yet been adjudicated. Among those is a suit from the first son, Hunter Biden, who in a civil complaint accuses Mr. Giuliani of, quote, hacking into, tampering with, manipulating, copying, disseminating, and generally obsessing over data, end quote, harvested from Mr. Biden's laptop. A voting technology company, Smartmatic, has sued Mr. Giuliani, Fox News, and others for $2.7 billion. That too is on the ledger. So imagine that. Imagine this award of $148 million being the first in that dam to break. That's why I brand this. And for those of you that may be wondering, the phrase high-tech lynching comes directly from Justice Clarence Thomas during his confirmation hearing years ago, right? When attempted assassinations of his character, links being drawn between past conduct with other people, much the same as we have seen in recent years with new appointments to the Supreme Court. But he referred to those things. Justice Thomas referred to those attempts at his character as a high-tech lynching. And I can think of no better, Alex Jones comparisons here obviously abound, but I can think of no better representation of what it looks like, what a high-tech lynching looks like than this.
It's time to start rethinking the foundations of defamation law and perhaps put damages caps on that. For example, if your reputation has been harmed, how much is that really? How much is that really worth to you? Why not have as a cap life expectancy times the average of the 3 most recent years of your earnings? So if a person's expected to live 30 more years and they made 30,000, that's 900,000 or $1 million. That is realistic. This business of silencing and trying to grind into dust folks by way of the civil justice system is not just, and it doesn't promote respect for the law. So we want to just quickly pat ourselves, not necessarily on the back, but take a look in the rearview mirror. When the year began, we talked about 5 predictions we had for the year, that there would be permanent changes to key voting demographics. Keep an eye on that. I'm not sure whether, we wanted to talk about election denialism, seizure of political power, and election lawfare from the left. I think we've just touched on that briefly with respect to Rudy.
Well, and just to properly introduce this, on January 2nd, 2023, and I'm sorry, I didn't label it well. I think we had really first started using Rumble at this point in time, but the video that all of these predictions exist on is Rumble video. It's labeled, January 2, I think, something like that. Anyway, we go through, it's about an hour long. And so if you would like the deeper dive on all of these things and where we were on January 2nd, 2023, with respect to these predictions, go and watch that video. I do recommend it. But the 5 that I'm going to list here and that we're going to go through, with relative speed are all introduced at that point. And on the number 1, sort of permanent changes to the key voting demographics, the phrasing around election denialism, the seizure of political power, and election lawfare were all a part of the discussion that you and I had, Norm. I think the big thing was that you expected, this was primarily your prediction, is that you expect that substantial voting demographic changes would take place during the calendar year 2023. And I think that's really difficult to argue with at this point, because it's not a single variable, right? Of course, we have the issue of immigration, which we will get to in a couple of minutes, but we also have the recognition of certain historically blue municipalities around the country that certain key voting demographics are shifting away from historically being a voting bloc on behalf of the Democrat platform, right?
Yeah, I did not see that happening. I didn't foresee
that part. But the fact that there were downstream and somewhat obvious consequences to those things that I think you and I were discussing as moving the needle with respect to new voting demographics is ripe. What we also discussed on that, Norm, is, and I think this was mostly from my perspective being younger, is that we do have these new eligible voters entering the voting pool, and the implementation of social media as almost an election mechanism that is not going away for that demo, and the importance of having some level of parity in information flow and communication, a la free speech, free expression across social media platforms that at that point in time, at January 2nd, 2023, did not exist on Twitter, right? There was the announcement of Elon's acquisition, the consummation thereof in late 2022, but the move to rebrand as X had not happened. There were all sorts of issues at the point that January 2nd stream went live that had been unresolved, namely the issues that were coming out of what were called the Twitter files, right? Remember Michael Schellenberger and several other notable reporters that were coming out and disclosing to the American public the depth to which the United States intelligence assets were embedded within Twitter and influenced Twitter's decision-making before the election, during the election, and after the election, right?
Fair enough. These are great points. I'd forgotten them. I think the last one, election lawfare from the left. I mean, we've already talked about the extraordinary Section 14, 14th Amendment, Section 3 wave cresting across the country, and the use of the Justice Department to strike back and try to penalize the right. It's happened. I mean, so, I think I'd give us, you guys grade us. I'd give us a B minus on that. We got some of the right keys, some of the right notes, didn't understand how they'd unfold. But certainly that prediction bore fruit. Second, Mike, the emergence of digitopia via artificial intelligence. This is a big year in artificial intelligence.
Yeah, so the context here, your phrase is digitopia, and I've still don't really like it from a branding perspective. I think I don't know. Digitopia seems a little, kind of dusty. But for all intents and purposes, digitopia via artificial intelligence is a reference to this construction of the common good, right? And you reference this um, collectivization of individual liberty interests into something like the common good as the tool by which America becomes more totalitarian. And your expectation in that stream was that the emergence of artificial intelligence would perhaps manifest by virtue of a lack of a modern sense of self within America's youth. And maybe I'm giving you an opinion that you don't recognize, but listening back to it, it seemed like you and I had recognized that there was a void in general purpose of young people and vision, and that COVID had done real damage to our confidence in the public health system, right? And the product that is healthcare, and had dealt a huge blow to real world connection by keeping people isolated in their homes, and the constant attention to this information flow. You may remember me referencing the million lane highway that is social media. Do you remember that?
I do.
In the effects that has had on consolidating opinion into something that is wholly unrecognizable unto the individual as a complete thing, but represents a huge weight against individual sovereignty and individual liberty interests, because that volume is just simply too loud for any one person to be able to break through.
Well, and
with limited exceptions like Elon Musk, Alex Jones, those types of people.
So I think, obviously the trends continue. I think the thing we didn't foresee is how quickly things like ChatGPT, Grok, and others would make more visible the emergence of general artificial intelligence, or generative AI, as some refer to it, on the landscape. We'll talk more. I think that there is a huge transformation going on in terms of how we process information and individual sense of efficacy with respect to information processing. It's the departure of Sam Altman from OpenAI this year becomes a big story because we don't really know why he was forced out. Some suggest it's because there's a real division within OpenAI about how to ethically respond to the challenge that is to come as early as next year, or in the next couple of years, according to Elon, when generative AI becomes a bigger and bigger part of our lives.
On the topic of AI specifically, it's something that I've noticed in the last week. I don't know how active you are on LinkedIn, Norm, and by
I'm not. I don't even look at it.
Check it, but it's like
maybe once every 6 months. Yeah,
LinkedIn will give you a million notifications for absolutely nothing.
That's why I stay off of it. Yeah.
This week, I got onto my account, and there was a notification that solicited my input on a broad topic, a broad, I guess, article that had been published. And I clicked through because, and the topic was sort of imperfectly aligned with, I think, what my profile represents. So I was already curious as to why I was being, solicited to put something in response to this article. I go to the article, and in the byline, the article itself is created by AI. And so I found an odd paradigm there where AI is creating content, and then LinkedIn's algorithm is soliciting feedback to that article from real people, but it wasn't generated by anybody real to begin with.
That sucking sound you hear is you being dragged down the digital drain. Write your own prose, read your own books, talk to people, not machines. Hey, prediction number 3, the emergence of the public health state gains momentum. I think I might have been wrong about that. I think I was bruised by the COVID topic experiments with public health emergencies on the state level.
No, broader context here. And I'm sorry, I should have put this on here. Norm, you were absolutely over the target. Yes, I think that when we reference public health state, we think most immediate proximity is to healthcare system, hospitals, COVID, and vaccines, etc. But what we also included there was environmental catastrophes, right? So climate change, gun violence, all of these other factors that would be wedded to this sort of environmental social governance initiative driven by big, sort of the private sector, BlackRock, the likes of that. And that is within this. I think that this year has shown in a substantial way that you were very over the target to be wary of the public health state being given additional power to manage what is basically an unsolvable problem, right? How is it that totalitarianism, or this sort of collectivized version of the common good, as you've referred it, is to be expected to solve every problem for every person? It
Well,
just
I do think that there's an old, that we need to reorient our discussions of political philosophy. There is a broad acceptance now that individual problems are best solved collectively, and I somehow the needle shifted. I'm actually reading a woman named Heather. I think it's Heather Rothschild Cox, Reawakening Democracy. And I'm stunned by the things she assumes along the way in the book, that somehow the collective good, and democratic norms, the inclusion of everyone in the broadest possible net, is what's necessary for human flourishing, and that who would question the premise that government is there for that purpose? Plenty of people, including me. So, Mike, I'm just kind of trying to get us through so we don't keep people too long. Camp of the Saints, immigration. Nobody's reading this book still. It's still prohibitively expensive because it's been delisted, but Jean Raspail's Camp of the Saints, written in the 1970s, is prophetic, in my view, and you owe it to yourself to read it. Just don't let anybody at the Southern Poverty Law Center know you're reading it, because they've called it a racist book. And I don't think of it as anything of the sort. I mean, it's a parable about what will happen as Western countries are overrun by immigrants that they cannot assimilate and accommodate, and whether the nature of life that Western societies, Western countries have taken for granted will be stretched to the breaking point and will in fact break. And French intellectuals look at this problem and foresee it, and they debate it, and they do nothing. And of course, once the deluge occurs, they're overrun. Are we in the midst of being overrun? I don't know. I don't know.
Marianne, do you remember Marianne Williamson?
I do.
She appeared on Tim Cass' episode, I guess, a day or two ago. And I am just blown away by how oblivious that woman, who is otherwise very accomplished and seems, fairly credible. I am blown away by people in her position's inability to grasp the true nature of what is happening with this migrant crisis. And someone who is, running for president. I think the crisis at the southern border is macroscopic in that there are, in my view, Norm, there are a number of issues that are being that are worthy of being unpacked, that exist within this migrant crisis, this influx of people across the border. You've got the 10th Amendment and federalism, right? The tension between Texas and the federal authorities. You obviously have the resources of a sovereign nation and the tax base that funds those resources being used for people who are unlawfully crossing the border, and what that means, what it means when local governments are unable to stem that or unwilling to even hear that. You've got now Ashley St. Clair, which I think I sent some follow up to the Delta airline.
Yeah.
Up to you this morning. I think I said this is the story of the year. This is the latest, is that, airlines exist in a quasi, sort of in the same way that the NFL exists within, professional football. Airlines exist in basically constant violation of antitrust by and through basically lawful monopolies and this is something that I read a lot about during law school. I was fascinated with the origins of Southwest Airlines as an intrastate airline, and how it was able to wedge itself into the national conversation when it was indeed ready to do interstate air travel. But it's interesting to me that you've got this block of transit that is the airline industry. Just a very you can count on one hand how many airlines you're able to buy a ticket to go to fly on. And then you also overlay that with the level of security that the average traveler must endure just to get into the airport and into a terminal, let alone get on a plane. And the story here is that we literally don't even have names for the overwhelming majority of the people who are being transited on Delta's planes. And the pilots have no idea who they are, what kind of security they've been subjected to, what sorts of immunization records they may or may not have. And so this is a huge issue that has developed within an issue that was already out of control. Now we've got sort of this quiet, dead of night decision, and you can look around in every single airport and see the same exact thing. So
here's the interesting thing. I've lost track of what's going on in Chicago. When the weather snapped, migrants were starting to want to leave, and suddenly that story has disappeared from national consciousness. I don't think folks have disappeared from the streets. I just don't hear people covering it. And in my home state, the state I spend most of my time in, Connecticut, I simply don't see any discussion of migrants arriving in the state. And it's impossible for me to believe that we're being ignored, especially since we regard ourselves as a sanctuary community. Indeed, in the city of New Haven, home to Yale University, migrants recently, appeared at a board of aldermen to urge the mayor to adopt more aggressive measures to welcome immigrants. I don't know if that means they want free housing now, or the ability to get on their feet for a couple years with a government-sponsored annuity, but it's a story that doesn't get covered, and I don't know why.
Well, and what there, I take several issues with all of it, but I think one thing that is relative, should be conflict-free, is that these decisions have been made. This is an organized effort at the federal level to transport these migrants to various cities using private enterprise, right? And my expectation is that Delta's not doing it for free, but Delta is also gagged as to what they're allowed to pay. So
how can that be? How can they be gagged as to that? How does that work? How does a public body decide to move people within the borders of the United States at public expense and tell the private party that they're paying, you can't talk about what we're paying you to do? You want to talk about fascism? You want to talk about authoritarianism? That's more the threat as far as I'm concerned.
And look, what are unions good for if they're not able to protect the pilots that fly the planes and their ability to speak freely on it, right? The airline industry is one of the most rigorously unionized industries in the country. Everything from pilots all the way down to the mechanics and everybody that's working on the tarmac, right? So the fact that you've got this sort of pro-worker instantiation, this I don't know, an organ that is inextricably there within this industry that cannot protect the liberty interests of those that it is designed to bargain on behalf of. So you've got an Delta, which is one of the leading, I think in terms of quality of these days, Delta is looked upon as one of the top two, right? Mm-hmm. But now you have pilots that are transporting people probably contrary to their own personal beliefs, but I assume based on everything that we saw through COVID, forced vaccinations, masking on planes, all this BS, it appears to me, and then of course, like the remasking effort, I think you pointed out when Alex Jones was talking about a report that came down that airlines were going to start remasking late, like I guess in the fall of this year, and he ended up being right about that. But I think it's just curious to me at bottom how there is absolutely seemingly no obligation on the part of our public betters, our elected betters, to even explain what the intended ends are in doing this. It's obviously happening. To what end? What is the strategy here? What ills are being cured? There's laughably zero explanation to any of that, right?
Well, we'll focus on that in the year to come. It's an evolving story. And finally, we mentioned that X was, and Elon's acquisition was going to be a game changer with respect to political discourse, and it has been. I mean, Alex Jones is back. Tucker's out of Fox, but he's got his own X platform and now his own media enterprise. The mainstream media, legacy media, as it were, continues to limp along, offering its analysis, so to speak, of the events of the day. But I think the largest tell that they're missing the point is the continued popularity of populism and of Donald Trump as an electoral factor in the 2024 election cycle, which will be obviously the story of the year in 2024. Yeah, he's been indicted a bunch of times. Yeah, he faces 91 criminal counts. Yeah, he's got more legal troubles than a large law firm could handle on its own. But yet, he's a voice that many people turn to. Why is that? Again, people hate Trump. Trump, never Trump is a huge thing in the United States. It's almost as big as election denialism. They seem to be flip sides of the same hysterical reaction to something going on in the coal mine. And I think that the emergence of independent platforms and places to talk and we hope we're one of them here, is an attempt to understand what's going on in the coal mine. The personalities don't matter. What draws people to these personalities does. And there is a crisis of legitimacy going on in the United States, and we are groping to cope with the crises we face and to make a decent life for as many people as possible. No, it's by no means obvious that we'll succeed in that. My fear going into 2024 is we might now literally be on the cusp of a civil war, depending on how the 14th Amendment Section 3 litigation gets handled. If we end up in a situation where states, a majority of them, or perhaps the United States Supreme Court, declares that the people's choice for president can't be on the ballot because of an amendment passed in the wake of the Civil War, who's going to be laughing then about constitutional interpretation? People will be saying, but he's the people's choice. We thought that this was a living constitution that had to adapt to democracy enforcing norms. And if reinforcing norms, and if Donald Trump is the people's choice, how can we take a 14th Amendment and shove it down the people's throats? That would be the equivalent of taking the right to abortion away. And I'm telling you that the currents and cross currents in constitutional interpretation in these cases, the lines are going to become so blurred and confusing that come the middle of 2024, I'm not sure we're going to recognize the country we live in any longer. I'm pretty concerned about it.
It's something that I'm realizing now, and I apologize if it's taken me this long to fully understand, Norm, but perhaps the notion of intellectual pluralism, right, is grounded in one's ability to recognize distinct differences in ideology and beliefs and views. And to your point just now, with sort of this almost creating a stew out of the Constitution, it seems as though we aren't even able to agree at this point on how to approach issues involving liberty, the deprivation thereof, any of the rights enshrined in our Bill of Rights. It seems as though it is getting more complicated, and especially when we have an environment in modern jurisprudence like we do right now, it's not clear to any observer that is interested in coming to some understanding as to what's going on, where to even start, where's the door. So that might be for us.
We're going to open one. We're going to kick one open next. We're going to kick one open next year, folks. That rounds out the year for us. Mike and I are taking next week off. We're going to sit down. We're going to meet regularly, maybe not at the same time, maybe a little later to accommodate old men who want to sleep in during the Christmas week. Like Mike, I'll be up bright and early. But we're going to focus closely on our goals and how to make this a better platform, more meaningful to you of us, to you and to us. We're going to feature some written content next year, some subscriber only visual content, and try to focus a little more on the manner in which we present material here, soliciting your input and trying valiantly to become a forum for ideas that won't be discussed elsewhere. So we want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas. If you've already celebrated Hanukkah, Happy Hanukkah. If you don't celebrate anything, what the hell's the matter with you? Life is a mystery, and the fact that you're here should astound you. And if you're not astounded by being alive, you're not asking enough questions and not looking at the right thing. Enjoy the mystery of life. Cherish it with those you love. Have a wonderful and blessed holiday season. And we'll be back when, Mike? The 2nd, 3rd, 4th? What day did we pick?
I think we picked the 2nd, right? January 2nd.
We'll be back January 2nd, bright and early at 8 o'clock.
January 2nd will be our 2024 predictions show. So the reason that we've talked about the 5 predictions from 2023 was to set up the discussion on 2024 and what we expect out of that. So
and if you don't think you can live without the dulcet tones of our voice every morning, and yes, Janice Dombrowski, I'm referring to you, you can find back episodes of us where?
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, wherever you find premium podcasts. And that's in the audio only form. You can always go back to YouTube, Rumble, or even on X at LawPod Daily and see the streams on replay in video.
Spread the word.
Anywhere.
A great stocking stuffer is a 3x5 card in the stocking. If you want to change your world, have your mind blown, and become a more thoughtful observer and participant of the world and around you, listen and watch Law and Legitimacy. Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas, Mike. Thank you for everything this year.
Oh, man. Thank you, Norm. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year. And we will be back soon. I'm sure you'll see us on X going at it here and there. But until then, thank you, Norm, for your commitment to this platform. Again, I'm honored, as always, that we have people who join us every day and let alone engage with the ideas. I'm humbled to have you as a mentor de facto. You know, I basically demanded that you be that. And I appreciate what we've done so far. I think this week that we'll take is really to honor how much we've invested of our time and energy and good faith into developing this, and then turn it into what it needs to be in its next phase. So I look forward to that almost more than anything, you know, short of, you know, watching my son's eyes twinkle in front of the Christmas tree on Christmas morning.
Nothing better. Nothing better.
The fact that we do this for free, I think, is a testament to that. So Norm, thank you. And thank you to everybody else who's watching. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
See you next time.
Ciao.